Anyone who's been keeping up with Ghost Recon Breakpoint will know that this game has been a disaster. Critical reception is just, incredibly middling. User reception is, well, you can see for yourself right here. A 2.6 user score and a 55 metascore. That sounds about right. This game was broken and buggy at launch. The systems that they implemented in terms of trying to make this a looter shooter, not well received, didn't make sense. And then, of course, there's the incredibly brazen monetization elements. You can scroll down here and just go through pages and pages of this stuff. And the time savers in particular were pretty much pay to win. You could upgrade your way to victory by just paying up. And Ubisoft tried to make this seem like it was an accident. They said some time saver items, skill point bundles, XP boosters, parts bundles for advanced weapon upgrades were available for purchase for a few hours in our store, but this was not our intention and was an error on our behalf. These items were designed as an optional way for players arriving later to the game post-launch to catch up with those who have been playing for longer and enjoy our co-op and challenging endgame experiences. These time savers have since been removed from our store for now. Time savers were not designed to grant any advantage over players choosing not to use them. Are you serious? Anything that allows you to get to a higher level, a higher degree of power, faster, is pay to win. It does grant you an advantage because people who don't pay up will have to take the long way around. And Ubisoft and other companies are well aware of the inconvenience of having to grind through a game that's purposely designed to be grindy. But just the audacity to pretend like, whoops, what? No, oh, that's weird. XP boosters, skill point bundles, and part bundles for advanced weapons in our store? That's crazy that got on there. We'll take that out. That was totally not our intention. Just that act they're putting on, pretending like this wasn't intentional, that this isn't just them backtracking after they realized how intense the backlash got, is pretty insulting. Which brings us to today's news. So we're seeing headlines like these crop up. Ubisoft admits Ghost Recon Breakpoint has been a disaster. So it turns out Ubisoft had this grand epiphany. If you launch games broken with awful reception, people won't buy them. And so if we look at Ubisoft's latest statement right here, they admit that sales for Ghost Recon Breakpoint have been thoroughly disappointing. And they've finally decided that maybe not rushing games to launch is a good idea for future prospects. So the following information comes from this financial update on Ubisoft's part from October 24th, 2019. It reads right here, the company has revised downwards its targets for fiscal 2019 to 2020 and now expects net bookings of approximately £1.450 billion and non-IFRS operating income of between £20 million and £50 million compared with the previous targets of net bookings of around £2.185 billion and non-IFRS operating income of around £480 million. That's a huge markdown if you look at the numbers here. And this comes in light of two things. First, a sharp downward revision in the revenues expected from Ghost Recon Breakpoint and, to a lesser extent, The Division 2. So basically, both of these games failed to meet sales expectations, particularly Ghost Recon Breakpoint. And then the second factor is the decision to increase development time for Gods and Monsters, Rainbow Six Quarantine, and Watch Dogs Legion, which will all now be released in fiscal 2020 to 21. Just think about that for a moment. All of these games were set to launch kind of rushed. If it wasn't for the fact that Ghost Recon Breakpoint had sold poorly, we might have seen all of these games launch somewhat broken, somewhat in a state that isn't ideal, that isn't up to standards. And the only reason they decided to delay these was because Ghost Recon Breakpoint undersold. Not because it was criticized, not because it was lambasted, but because that criticism actually yielded some results and actually had a tangible effect on Ghost Recon Breakpoint sales. It's the sales that informed this move, not the criticism. So that's key, because the language Ubisoft speaks, and many of these companies speak, is money. Because ultimately, they don't care about quality at launch, as long as they can meet financial guidance. But they're finally realizing, oh, people are becoming more privy and more aware of video game trends. of rushing games out to release, and they're not falling for this crap anymore. And so now they're finally saying, okay, we actually have to release good games. So a few more relevant quotes here. We have not capitalized on the potential of our latest 2 AAA releases. For Ghost Recon Breakpoint, while the game's quality appeared on track, based on E3 Gamescom previews and our latest internal playtests... Wait, what? The game's quality appeared on track. Every coverage I've seen of this from E3 has been negative, and I played this game at E3, and it was awful. It was just boring, broken. I was seriously worried about this game, and everyone I talked to at E3 who played this game also said the same things. It just didn't seem like this game was up to standards, and they hoped that by the time the game launched, a few months down the line, that everything would be fixed, but obviously that wasn't the case. So I don't know. This is a suspicious statement right here to indicate that the quality appeared on track. I mean, any level of playtesting would immediately make it apparent that Breakpoint wasn't ready. Anyway, the report continued. While the game's quality seemed on track, critical reception and sales during the game's first weeks were very disappointing. So sales just completely tanked. As we have done with past titles, we will continue to support the game and listen to the community in order to deliver the necessary improvements. I'm sick and tired of game companies saying we will listen after the fact, after they've broken a launch, after they've botched a launch. Why not listen to us before a game comes out? In fact, if you're listening at all, you're not going to repeat history over and over again. If this were your first rodeo with a broken launch, it'd be one thing, but we have been through this time and again. If you were listening, you'd prevent this stuff from happening ever again. Instead of doubling down on rushed releases just so you can meet financial guidance, the report continued. At this stage, we have identified 3 main reasons behind this underperformance. First, it is harder to generate interest for a sequel to a live multiplayer game, when prior iterations benefited from years of optimization. Consequently, we need to make sure there is more time between each iteration of live games. This is such horse crap what Ubisoft is saying here, that it's harder to generate interest for a sequel to a live service game. It really depends on how you handle the first game, whether you build that game up to a proper state, whether it's something that left a good impression on people, and then how you handle the sequel, if that turns out to be better than the previous iteration. If the sequel is shittier than how you left the first game, then of course people are going to either stay with the first game or just kind of lose interest in the series. And also, if your first game didn't make a good initial impression, and Ghost Recon Wildlands initially had a rough launch as well, then there's just going to be less of a momentum for the sequel. If you make good quality games and good quality sequels that actually build upon the previous titles, then the sequels will perform. Moving on. Second, our strategy of introducing gameplay innovations, oh boy, in our games has had a very positive impact on our brand. However, to win over players, these innovations need to be perfectly implemented in order to offer an optimal experience. I love how they're calling the shoehorning of looter-shooter elements and Ghost Recon Breakpoint an innovation, as if to say nobody else has done that before. Except when other games did it, it actually made sense for their games. Looter-shooter elements don't make sense in Ghost Recon Breakpoint. That's one of the major points of contention for this title. It just feels like these systems have been ham-fisted just so they can monetize this stuff, just to bolster the monetization. It's a game that's been cynically designed with monetization in mind. This excerpt continued. This has not yet been sufficiently the case with Ghost Recon Breakpoint. While the change of formula has been very well received by some players, with an average daily playtime per player of over 3 hours, it also has been strongly rejected by a significant portion of the community. Finally, Ghost Recon Breakpoint did not come in with enough differentiation factors, which prevented the game's intrinsic qualities from standing out. All of this just feels like Ubisoft is trying to sugarcoat the real reasons Ghost Recon Breakpoint didn't do so hot. They don't talk about the microtransactions at all. They don't talk about how this game was clearly designed to maximize monetization. They don't talk about the broken state of the game. They're just trying to dampen the blow by giving off all these excuses while patting themselves in the back here and there, saying, well, here are some things we did right. People play 3 hours a day. Some players liked what we did here. This is just such a half measure of a commitment to be better and to be self-reflective about what they did, about how they messed up. They then say right here, we're tackling these issues head on and already are implementing significant changes to our production processes. We are confident in our capacity to adapt and evolve, as we have done successfully many times in the past. You have not adapted or evolved at all, because Ghost Recon Breakpoint is a repeat of how you've launched games previously. If you would have successfully adapted and evolved, we wouldn't be here having this discussion, would we? I don't trust that you're actually implementing significant changes to your production processes. That's hard to believe at this point. The report finally concludes with a more extensive statement about how they have delayed Gods and Monsters, Rainbow Six Quarantine, and Watch Dogs Legion. And this is the right move, I'll give them that. But this is also not something we should be applauding, because this is the standard, the baseline, in terms of how a product release should be approached. This is them saying we're not going to be shitty by rushing these games at launch. This is them just doing their due diligence, and I'm not going to pat them on the back and cheer them for that. I'm just going to say about damn time they finally realized that broken launches don't pave the road for long-term success. As for what's happened since Ubisoft's latest press release, the latest financial report, well, shares have tanked by about 20%, right here it says. Ubisoft's stock price fell over 20% in morning trade, hitting its lowest level since April 2019, the lowest since over 2 years ago. So that's bad, and you can see right here the results of that, the significant dip right here. And now it's kind of picking back up, but it's still a pretty significant dip. Now here's the thing, I know people like to celebrate when greedy game companies suffer financially, but when you think about it, this is actually not good news, because investors pulled out not because of the negative critical reception, they pulled out because of Ubisoft's decision to delay everything after they realized they should release good games. And that's why game companies are discouraged from releasing their games fully fleshed out, not broken at launch, because if they don't meet these deadlines, if they don't meet specific financial guidance, then investors pull out. And so this stuff is what discourages companies from delaying games, from working on quality instead of quantity. And what easier way is there for these game companies to make a bunch of money than to factory produce these games and just spit them out, rather than taking their time with it? They're discouraged from doing that by the investors. Last but not least, I'd like to take a look at this blog post from the Ghost Recon Breakpoint team, published on October 28th, 2019. They talk about how they're going to move forward after all the backlash that the game's garnered. It reads right here, "Hello Ghosts, since the launch of Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint, we have been listening to you." Again, how about you listen before the game's launch? How about you don't launch a game broken? And how about you learn from past mistakes? And I especially direct this at the publishers, the higher-ups at Ubisoft, who force these developers into engaging in these unreasonable development cycles, where time is just so constrained that they cannot polish their products. Then they talk about how grateful they are about the feedback, yada yada yada, and then they delve into what's wrong with the game right now. Number 1, technical state of the game. Our first priority is to improve the technical state of the game. We know many players had a difficult time with game bugs and unexpected stability issues at launch, and we are making every effort possible to address these issues as soon as we can. Then they talk about their roadmap for patches and updates that will hopefully fix a lot of the game's issues. Who knows if this roadmap will even go fulfilled on time, in a timely fashion, given how behind the team is now, because they've had to spend so much time fixing the game rather than working on the next things. We'll see what happens. You never really know. These roadmaps have proven time and again to be incredibly unreliable, because more often than not, there's just not a solid plan for these long-term live service development cycles. Number 2, post-launch content. As we focus on improving the game, we also want you to know that our commitment does not stop here. We are dedicated to supporting Ghost Recon Breakpoint in the long term with plenty of post-launch content and special events to keep the world constantly growing and evolving. The post then talks about some of the content people can expect, like Project Titan, their first ever raid, and the Terminator live event. Here's the thing, maybe years down the line, this game will be up to standards in an acceptable state. Ubisoft has proven that they do stick with their games and know how to make a comeback. But I'm tired of this cycle of releasing games broken at launch. Like, that shouldn't be excusable just because Ubisoft eventually gets these games right. They eventually fix them. It wasn't alright when it happened with Rainbow Six Siege, and it's certainly not alright now when Ubisoft should be learning from their mistakes, not repeating them. Number 3, in-game economy. We also heard the criticism regarding the in-game economy. That is why we're currently working to make adjustments according to players' feedback in the next few weeks, making the experience for players more comfortable. They're acting like they suddenly had this realization that their in-game economy was utterly fucked. But if they have been keeping track of how people have been reacting to other games' in-game economies, it should have been obvious that the way Ghost Recon Breakpoint monetized itself was all kinds of messed up. Moving on, number 4, AI teammates. We announced at E3 2019 that AI teammates would come back to Ghost Recon Breakpoint, and they will. Ghost Recon Breakpoint was designed from the ground up to be enjoyed in co-op up to 4 players and as an innovative, pure solo experience. As such, adding back AI teammates to the game is a major undertaking that will still require time. We will update you as we progress towards their release. Again, if Ubisoft had just delayed what was obviously an incomplete and broken game, the features promised way back when could have been delivered on time. Number 5, freedom of choice. Oh, that's rich. Oh, I hate it when game companies talk about choice. Like we chose the way Breakpoint launched, like we chose its monetization, the way it ham-fisted looter-shooter elements to bolster the monetization. None of us chose this. Let's get that straight. It reads right here, finally, we are aware that some of the design choices made have caused polarized reactions and discussions regarding the direction taken by the Ghost Recon franchise. We are happy to see players embracing the new elements of the game. Nobody I've talked to has embraced this crap, but we also understand that there are areas of improvements. Some of you would like our new survival mechanics to have more impact on your experience, while others dislike the tiered loot progression we have added. One of the key elements of our vision for Ghost Recon is to immerse our fans in a gritty and authentic military experience. Yes, authentic military experience, because clearly in real life, when a soldier is out there in the battlefield and feel like they aren't performing up to par, they just pull out their credit cards and spend some money on skill points and XP boosters to bolster their abilities. Yes, Ubisoft, super authentic. Moving on, in line with this vision and the feedback we received, we're working on a more radical and immersive version of Ghost Recon Breakpoint, so it looks like they're going out of their way to overhaul the game, which is interesting. Only time will tell how that pans out. We also want to let you tailor your experience to the way you want to enjoy the game, since freedom of choice has always been a part of the Ghost Recon DNA. This stuff makes me cringe. It's still too early to share details on how that will work exactly, but it is top of the mind for the team, and we will keep you updated as we progress. And then here's the conclusion where they talk about how they're fully committed and how there are big changes coming and how they're always listening to feedback and all the usual crap. So this is where we're at, folks. It's Ubisoft repeating their usual cycle over again. This wasn't acceptable back then, years ago, and it's certainly not acceptable now when this stuff is becoming more prominent in the AAA landscape. When developers are becoming more complacent to just rushing products out and fixing them later, screwing over initial adopters. So there you have it, folks. These are one man's take on the whole situation. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions about Breakpoint's disappointing sales, Ubisoft delaying everything, the way the company suffered as a result of all of this, and how they're committing themselves to improving Breakpoint. Do you trust them at this point that they'll actually do right by their words, or do you feel cynical about this whole situation and the future despite Ubisoft's commitments. Drop a comment below, share any thoughts and opinions you have, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.